Welcome back, everyone. This is chapter 13 of REN-SHEN Half Spirit, The Castle. It was precisely 7 p.m. when the limousine arrived. Just like the bloody train system in Tokyo, not a moment sooner or later, Steve thought to himself. Sensei had joined them earlier and they all arrived at the entrance to the residence within 20 minutes. Megumi seemed surprised with all the security equipment installed. The walls and security gates and cameras are all new. How long have they been here? Megumi asked the driver. He replied, well, over 2 years now. Some people used to come and try to bother Kumicho. Passing through the outer gate, Steve noticed 2 plinths, which would typically have been the perfect locations for Shisa statues. In fact, it looked like they were there previously. They had patently been destroyed, yet parts of their lion paws still remained. They crossed over a moat and proceeded to weave around the complex until passing through 2 more secured gates. Finally, they reached the residence. It was a majestic castle, a combination of intricately carved timber and stonework in the Japanese style, with an incredible 5-story tower in the middle. Steve looked at Megumi and asked, "You lived here?" "You poor girl, such a tough life." Megumi replied, "I would have preferred living with my mother in Uncle Taki's little home to any of this." Kumicho's assistant Nakano was waiting at the front of the residence. Megumi was holding Steve's hand and her fingernails dug into him when she saw Nakano. "I have despised that witch my entire life." Steve didn't dare ask any questions about her. Nakano feigned her pleasantries and welcomed them inside. She said, "Your father has been looking forward to this all day. He is waiting for you in the lounge. Please walk with me." The lobby was bigger than any house Steve had ever been inside. It was a huge white space and elegantly simple, with large white marble flooring and impossibly high white walls. After traversing the distance of a normal-sized block of residential land back in Australia, they finally entered the lounge. Kumicho welcomed them all with his booming voice. He looked like a king. His suit was impeccably tailored and every movement and gesture he made was perfect. Steve again began to feel inadequate in his rather poorly fitting suit as he adjusted his collar. The room was incredibly impressive. It looked like a museum with beautiful paintings adorning the walls and carved traditional Japanese furniture in addition to the most modern magazine-style furniture pieces from Italy and Germany. Steve had begun to bow to greet Kumicho as the others did, but Kumicho walked towards him and said, "No, allow me to welcome you to my home your way." He went to shake Steve's hand. Steve looked at Kumicho's outstretched hand. He could have sworn a tattoo of a serpent or dragon peeked its head out from under the cuff of his shirt and then disappeared from view. They shook hands and Steve tried to sense the vibrations in Kumicho. The deeper he searched, the stronger there seemed to be a resistance. Like pushing into a pillow up against a wall, he thought to himself. It was something he'd never experienced before. Kumicho was smiling and looking at Steve intently. He invited them all to look at some of his antique collectible items. He described a few, but Steve was drawn to the collection of swords like a moth to a flame. Ah, the Judan likes his swords. I have many special swords in my collection. Some are more valuable than others, but others are more sentimental to me, said Kumicho. Steve couldn't contain his awe. He was quite sure he was looking at a collection of some of the finest swords in the world. The blades were exquisite and showed the highest level of craftsmanship. The way different metals were used to create the perfect combination of strength, hardness and sharpness, the ornate handles. But there was one sword, unlike all the others. Steve was immediately drawn to it. In comparison to the others, it was inelegant. It was almost in the shape of a Chinese broadsword, a little less broad perhaps, certainly not as beautifully proportioned as some of the other katanas in the collection. Yet it had the symbol on the blade near the handle, the 16-pointed sun-shaped rosette Steve had seen all his life, and on the pommel, a lion's head. The blade's attraction to him was magnetic. "You like this one? A special one indeed. This is the sword of Daruma. It has remained in my family for centuries. The charlatan Daruma gave it to one of my ancestors. It is indeed a powerful sword. Some blades carry a spirit, and this one carries the spirit of my family's royal blood. We will look at it together later, but let us eat first, said Kumicho. Steve couldn't stop thinking about the sword. It would have meant nothing had he not seen the symbol and the line on it. It seemed to corroborate everything Temyana had told him about his own lineage. If Daruma carried the sword with Macedonian symbols on it, perhaps he did have some connection to Macedonia. But how? And why would a priest king carry a sword anyway? He thought to himself. They moved to the dining room, and Steve was positive the dining table was larger than Uncle Tucky's entire apartment. It began to dawn in Steve's mind that Megumi really did abandon a life of great privilege when she went to live in Tokyo. His disconcerting thoughts about being able to provide a future for her and their baby returned to trouble him again. Kumicho insisted they all sit close to each other at one end of the table. Nakano had taken the seat to Kumicho's right and Steve to his left, then Megumi and Sensei. Kumicho said to Steve, I personally went to my cellar to find something to remind you of home and found some wine from your hometown. Let us enjoy this 1960 Penfolds Grange Hermitage with our meal. They say it is a very good vintage. Glasses were poured and dinner was served by competent house staff. Steve had still not acquired the taste for wine. He knew the Grange Hermitage was the most expensive Australian wine money could buy, especially the older vintages such as the one they were drinking. Yet he could barely discern the difference between a $3 bottle and a $500 bottle. He was embarrassed about his lack of knowledge and refinement and recalled his father's chip on his shoulder about his peasant background. The food looked like a menu from an expensive restaurant in Tokyo with expensive Japanese items such as Wagyu beef, fugu fish and matsutake mushrooms, in combination with various French cuisine food. It was all a little rich for Steve and Sensei. Megumi, in contrast, looked comfortable around all the exotic foods and even knew which cutlery to use. She avoided the fugo or puffer fish due to her pregnancy. More lethal than cyanide, only a fully trained and licensed chef is able to prepare the fish so no lethal doses of tetrodotoxin remain present to paralyze and kill the unsuspecting diner. Steve didn't bother with sampling the delicacy. However, he noticed Sensei did, only after Kumicho ate the delicacy. Kumicho proposed a toast to the small gathering. To the good fortunes that reunited my family today, to my lovely daughter and her husband and the wonderful gift of my new grandchild on the way. May your child never disappoint you. Megumi had impressed Steve all evening with her restraint. She didn't take the bait with other comments her father had made as the night progressed. She didn't want anything to inflame the already tainted relationship between her and her father. She had no intention of reconciliation, but she was certainly hopeful for a way to coexist without being in constant fear of his impositions. However, the toast was received in the worst possible way. Megumi could now no longer contain her anger and replied, There were no good fortunes which brought us here. It was one of your little criminal thugs who wanted my friend to be his full-time sex slave. The same one who broke her neck, and then another of your slaves who killed Uncle Tucky. I have no idea how that could be understood to be good fortune. It was not good fortune. It was just a good example of the way you see the world through your selfish eyes. I hope my child disappoints you as much as I have disappointed you. It will mean my child will reject everything you believe to be important. I wanted to find if there was a way I could look at you and not question how Mother died and not blame you for Uncle Tucky's death. I wanted to find a way we could have a normal relationship. To be honest, I wanted to think, in spite of every evil thing you have done, somehow you could change and be a good man. Megumi was trembling with rage. It was as though she finally let out all her internalized pain and anger. All of it was directed at her father. Steve had never seen Megumi in such a state. He could see she needed to tell her father precisely how she felt, but he could feel the tension in the room and was worried about how she was coping. He helped Megumi sit down and tried his best to comfort her. His movements were awkward. He felt uneasy, but Steve tried his best not to let his thoughts and concerns betray his actions. Nothing was more important than ensuring his wife was comforted and safe. Nakano had been very quiet up until Megumi's outburst. She was sitting next to Kumicho and tisked at Megumi, rolling her eyes. She said to Megumi, Have you no shame? Talking to your father like that? After all he has done for you. Disgusting. Megumi seemed to be unravelling in the toxic environment. She replied to Nakano, "You call me disgusting? Wearing my mother's jewellery and wearing my mother's husband, even before she died. Why are you even sitting at this table? Servants should sit elsewhere." Sensei made an attempt to de-escalate the tension. He said, "Yes, Agari-san. Steve has been a wonderful influence in our lives. A calm and good man. A very special young man. Surely you can sense this, Agari-san." Kumicho had done well to conceal his emotions. He almost maintained his smile during the entire time of Megumi's outburst. However, Sensei seemed to have inadvertently hit a raw nerve. Kumicho's mood quickly soured as he replied, "A good man?" He raised his voice as he slammed his fist on the table. "A good man? And what does it mean to be a good man? My gardener is a good man. I can't even remember his name. What does a good man know of the world? Is it noble or honourable to be oblivious of the world's challenges and complexities, to not crave the sweetest nectar? Is a good man tested often, or does he merely avoid the challenge? How can a good man judge others if he's never fought for or savoured the taste of success? I don't believe in good men. They're just men who dare not dream for the fruit at the top of the tree. They have no temptation because they know that deep in their hearts they don't deserve it. They lay in the bed at the end of the night, paralysed with the fear of what the next day will bring, waiting for death to release them from the misery of their uneventful lives. Not for me. What about you, Steve? Are you really a good man? Will you be forgotten? Who did my daughter marry, a gardener or a giant?" Steve was not ready for such a direct and sensitive line of questioning. He'd been struggling with his own sense of purpose for some time. The questions were extremely close to the bone for him. With the baby's arrival imminent, he would often wonder what kind of example he would be for his child. He questioned what kind of life his family could possibly have with him as a karate instructor. For all intents and purposes, may as well have been the gardener of which Kumicho spoke. He didn't like anyone directing their raised voice at him. His inclination was to meet fire with fire, but his Goju-Ryu had taught him new instinctual reactions. He calmed and reminded himself of the penetrating questions his father used to ask him. Those uncomfortable questions which forced Steve to develop his own thought processes and helped to consolidate his own belief systems. Steve took a breath and responded to Kumicho. "In all honesty, I think most people want to be thought of as good. If I try to define good in my own mind, it means to be a kind person who has the approval of others. Now you seem to have given me a choice, either be a good person or a giant. I must imagine a giant is someone powerful like you who does not feel the need to be kind or approved by others. I would like to think if you're truly good, then you will be rewarded for it. It doesn't have to be money. It can be the love of my wife and child. It can be the respect of people I interact with. I think it's heroic to stand up against evil. I think that is something powerful and noble and maybe more challenging than just trying to achieve success." Kumicho smiled and addressed everyone. "Please, let us move to the lounge so we can continue this most excellent discussion. And let us not forget that Steve wanted to see that sword again. Please come." Megumi was more than happy to leave the discussion at that. She knew more than well that her father would never be convinced of anything, and this was nothing more than an exercise in mind games. "I'm tired. I think we should be leaving," she said as she looked at Steve. Kumicho had already made his way into the lounge and gestured for everyone to join him. Steve whispered to Megumi, "It's one night. Let's just end it gently and then we can move on with our lives. Tomorrow we leave. Come on, my baby." Kumicho was pleased everyone joined him as he replied to Steve's opinion. "Such wonderful ideals from the somewhat naive young man before me. Steve-san, as you become older, you will ask yourself many questions. The one you will ask the most is, was it all worth it? Could I have done more? You will look at your life and then you will look around and see the world for what it is. Nothing more than resources to gather and consume. You will realize some people just want to serve and others choose to lead. There is no choice for the servant, but there is for the leader. You just have to learn your true nature. Make no mistake, we all serve someone. Even Ishiganto served his god if you study his life carefully. Sensei interrupted the discussion. Ishiganto served the people, and by doing this, he served his god. Kumicho's eyes darted towards Sensei. He did not receive Sensei's comment favorably. He said, "Nakandari, son, when you welcomed the demons into your life and gave my most loyal servant Hiro his power, who were you serving? Who did you make a deal with? What did you receive in return? Nobody does anything for nothing, Nakandari Sensei. Tell them what you received in return," as he pointed to Steve and Megumi. Sensei looked quite upset and unwilling to respond. Kumicho persisted. "Tell them. Let them know what kind of man you are, Nakandari Sensei. Tell them who you served." Sensei responded, "They know me. They know I created Demon Hiro. I have nothing to hide. I received your immunity. That was all. I didn't ask for it. I was ready to die. You wanted me killed, and then you rewarded me with my life, even though I was tortured every day with those demons of war. They know this, and they know I would gladly give my life to redeem Hiro's life." Sensei was awash with the anguish of that traumatic moment again. Kumicho laughed. "Oh, Nakandari-san, you think too much of yourself. Let me tell you a secret. You didn't make Demon Hiro. I already welcomed him into my inner circle. You only invited the demons into your own spirit, you foolish man. You served me very well until my daughter's husband came here. Don't you remember?" Sensei looked genuinely confused. "Are you saying it wasn't me who made Demon Hiro? I've blamed myself all this time. I've never willingly served you, and I never will. And I will take back my student, and together with Ishiganto, we will banish your demon from him." Kumicho appeared bemused with Sensei's response. "Please don't play with words. You say you would never willingly serve me, but you did serve me. Have you forgotten? How many times Taki returned here in the last few years to try to kill me? You told me every time. You were my best source of information, my best spy. Did Ishiganto banish your memory also? Or perhaps you never told your Ishiganto and my daughter how you've been my best spy until recently." Megumi and Steve both looked shocked. They never really knew what Uncle Taki was up to whenever he came back to Okinawa. He always said he had some business to attend to, and they never questioned him further about the nature of that business. To find out that Sensei was telling Kumicho about Uncle Taki's movements was upsetting to both of them. Steve had already developed a knowledge of how demonic influences could manifest the mind of a man. He couldn't blame Sensei for his actions, but still felt saddened to learn of his actions. Sensei looked at Megumi and Steve with a guilty look. He said, "It's true. I reported Taki's movements to this man. But we all know I was not myself. I made my peace with Taki-san after I was cured. My life is dedicated to fixing the errors of my past now." He looked pleadingly towards Megumi and Steve as he asked them, "Please forgive me. I already punished myself for my actions more than anyone else can." Megumi was extremely upset. She had no anger for Sensei. His remorse for any wrongdoing was obvious and understandable. But her father was gloating and giving the impression of supreme vindication. She held her head in her hands and started to scream. She stood up and howled at her father. "We are now arguing about how bad Sensei was. Meanwhile, there is no doubt you had everything to do with murdering Uncle Taki. If you're going to be completely honest, just tell me you killed my mother, and then we can all accept you for what you are. Nothing more than a murdering criminal, a thug. Just another murderer in my bloodline. Admit it, you did it, you killed mother." Kumicho exploded in reply. "You want me to admit to murdering Taki and your mother? No. Instead of defending me, my only daughter accuses me. Taki tried to kill me many times. I chose to let him live, just so he could look after you. Yes, ungrateful you. But I have very devoted servants. Sometimes they want to help me too much. In truth, it was no great loss to lose him. And your mother should have supported me instead of working against me. She was the one behind the people who have been trying to overthrow me. You think Taki was smart enough to do that? She was sabotaging me from the inside. We could have been so successful together, but she was nothing more than a nuisance to me. She was weak, and she made you weak also. Look at the Gaijin you chose to marry. He will never understand our ways. He will never rise up to lead. You chose someone as weak as yourself, my little crying daughter and a little karate boy husband. If I was the man you say I am, I should kill you both right now to spare you from your pathetic lives of mediocrity. Megumi was hysterical. She launched herself at her father and slapped him. Steve positioned himself in between them, but it was too late. Her slap had already landed on his face. Her fingernails managed to scratch her father's face. My husband is more of a man than you've ever been. You should feel ashamed just being in his presence. He is a true king, and you are just a murdering thief, she said. Kumicho touched his face and found the blood. He laughed as he wiped the blood on his fingers on Steve's jacket. He glared at Steve and said, "Will you control your wife, karate boy? Or maybe you prefer to challenge me. Do you think you have any chance with me, karate boy? Or is it Ishiganto? Is that your name now?" Steve was furious. The man before him was clearly behind the deaths of Megumi's mother and Uncle Taki, and he was now goading him. He looked at Kumicho with a raging intensity, but managed to repress his instinctual urges to hit this man. He pulled Megumi further away from her father and said to Kumicho, Yeah, we're done here. Stay out of our lives and don't even think about looking for us. You're nothing to Megumi, and you'll never meet your grandchild, and you will never see your daughter again. Steve held Megumi and guided her from the lounge, heading towards the lobby area with Sensei. Sensei whispered to Steve, "I have people nearby. Let's just get out of here and we can make our way back." Kumicho had ripped his jacket and shirt off, and he sniggered as he called out to them, "Stop right there! Ishiganto thinks we are done here. No, I'm very sure we are far from done. In fact, I have some very unfinished business. Nakandari Sensei has lived far too long and does not seem to understand or appreciate my benevolence. I think it is time for him to meet his destiny now. And you, karate boy, Ishiganto, don't you still want to see my sword?" Kumicho slapped his hand on the glass display cabinet, shattering the glass. He reached inside and seized the sword which Steve had admired only a few hours earlier. Kumicho held the sword up in a manner which could only be perceived as a declaration of war. Kumicho's lean torso was rippling with muscles, and his tattoos were nothing like Steve had ever seen before. Steve recalled the exquisite detail and elegance of Sensei Mike's tattoos. But Kumicho's tattoos were something far beyond that level of detail and beauty. Chrysanthemums with dragons and vipers intertwined among the petals, radiating outwards from his chest like flames. The serpents were actually moving on Kumicho's skin. They were weaving in and out of the petals. They were transfixed on Steve, and he was mesmerized by them. One moved up Kumicho's arm to pounce upon a small trail of blood emanating from the hand that smashed the glass cabinet. Steve was debating with himself whether to engage with the madman holding the sword in front of him or to get out of there as soon as possible. He never knew Kumicho had trained under Sensei until earlier that day. As strongly as Steve believed in his own ability, he knew this was Kumicho's home and every advantage was with him. He saw all the security contingents every step of the way into the castle. He figured it was also well within reason to assume monsters like those at his tournament were likely to be nearby. Steve turned away from Kumicho and ushered Megumi into the lobby, only to find Sensei standing there facing away from the door. He was looking upwards. Steve and Megumi turned to look in the direction Sensei was looking. Hovering menacingly near the ceiling of the palatial lobby was a winged demon hero. He looked like a serpent dragonfly, jerkily suspended in the air, with his all too familiar black eyes and wings spanning half the width of the lobby. He called to Sensei, "Nakandari Sensei, it is time for me to finish my job. Prepare to die." Sensei rooted himself into the ground. He had no intention of fleeing whatsoever. He whispered to Steve, "Please leave, Steve-san. Take Megumi and go far away from here. Find your path in Fujian. Remember!" Demon Hiro heard Sensei as though he was right next to him. He hissed, "I will take your Ishiganto to Fujian in a coffin, and then I will piss on Ishiganto's god." Steve was in an impossible situation. He needed to ensure Megumi was safe, but he couldn't let the mortal challenge continue and see Sensei killed. He looked at Sensei and took his position. Sensei immediately understood Steve's intention. Demon Hiro already sprang forward, heading towards Sensei. Sensei had commenced his Lohan vortex as Steve summoned his lion energy. He unleashed his attack as Demon Hiro swooped down towards Sensei. Within an irreconcilable moment, Kumacho had entered the room and used the sword to intercept and extinguish Steve's lion energy. Kumacho looked at the sword with a sense of surprise as it began to emit a bright orange glow. Demon Hiro flew down again and Sensei blocked his attack and flung Demon Hiro to the ground. Steve powered another lion energy attack through Demon Hiro and the demon separated from Hiro. Hiro was unconscious on the floor while the demon flew around the room like a balloon losing air until it saw Sensei, then it went straight for him. Sensei recommenced his Lohan vortex technique in an attempt to trap the demon. Kumacho moved across the room at a supernatural speed. He appeared within the vortex and removed Sensei's head with Daruma's blade in one swift motion. "No time for games," said Kumacho as he turned his attention to Steve. The demon spirit retreated and then injected itself inside Nakano. She transformed immediately. She became elongated and her facial features had transformed into a grotesque caricature of what she used to look like. She excreted a reverberating whisper directed at Megumi. "Shameful Megumi, disgusting Megumi, cry, cry, cry." Demon Nakano was taunting Megumi and heading towards her. Steve saw the looming threat of Demon Nakano. He channeled his lion energy directly at the demon. He mustered a powerful blast and the demon was ejected yet again. This time it was headed straight for Megumi. Steve had no time to waste. He knew that if the demon managed to merge with Megumi, it would potentially destroy the only things he loved in this world. He aimed another energy blast at the demon only to be slapped down on the ground by a laughing Kumacho. His energy pulse was rendered ineffective. Kumacho kicked Steve while he was on the ground. Each hit was like a brick wall had crashed down on him. Steve was losing his clarity of judgment. His sense of purpose was clouded by the physical onslaught he was enduring. He would lose everything. He remembered the Shisa necklace Sensei had given him, and he powered up his hand as he ripped it from his neck. He threw it at the demon shadow flying around the room. From the medallion, two fierce Shisa sprang forth. The Shisa, with its mouth open, launched at the demon shadow, devoured it, and quickly turned towards Kumacho. The other Shisa, with its mouth closed, went straight to Megumi's defense. Steve was on the ground trying to regain his composure when Kumacho sprang towards the Shisa near Megumi. He stabbed the lion beast through the head with his sword. The blade was magical, powerful, too powerful. The lion dissipated immediately, but the blade continued its path straight into Megumi's throat. Steve and Kumacho screamed in unison, "No!" Steve's adrenaline propelled him towards his wife. He held his wife and summoned his energy around her throat to try to heal her. But blood was escaping too fast. She was dying. Megumi couldn't say anything, but her eyes looked at Steve with the love he knew and treasured and craved his entire life. He cradled her and begged her to live as tears filled his eyes. She faded quickly and Steve roared as rage consumed him. The other Shisa had already fiercely pounced on Kumacho's back. It tore into Kumacho's flesh as its fangs bit into his shoulder. Kumacho had transformed when the Shisa attacked him. He doubled in size and lost any semblance with the human form he had previously. His eyes had blackened and the serpents writhed upon his blackened and scaly skin. Kumacho turned and dealt the lion gargoyle an immediate death with his powerful blade. Kumacho yelled at Steve, "This is your doing! You killed my daughter the moment you touched her, and now you will die." Kumacho raised the sword and Steve immediately launched at him to ensure the blade couldn't gather any momentum. Kumacho swung the blade at Steve, but he already intercepted the blade near the handle. The brief contact with the blade created a power surge through Steve. He slapped the hideous Kumacho to the ground with unprecedented power. It shocked both Kumacho and Steve. Steve kicked him repeatedly until Kumacho managed to find his feet. The sword remained on the ground and Kumacho's strength had returned as the serpents on his body began to writhe. Steve seemed to have lost some momentum as Kumacho was increasingly finding his power. Steve fought for his life. He summoned all his lion energy and punched and kicked at Kumacho. It was obvious he wasn't just fighting a man. He was fighting the demon monster in addition to each and every one of his tattoo serpents as well. His best wasn't enough. Kumacho was winning and Steve knew it. He summoned his energy and performed a takedown. It worked. He managed to negotiate a choke on Kumicho. Steve could feel Kumicho losing his life force, but then the serpents on Kumicho's chest attacked Steve's choking arm. He had to let go. The pain was excruciating. Kumicho gathered the sword as Steve quickly found his feet. They faced each other and Kumicho said, "I tasted your rage. Now you understand true hatred. You could be of use to me. Bow to me and I will spare your life. You can easily be one of the few, worthy." Steve replied, "Your death is my only purpose in life. The only reason for my existence now is to end yours." Steve could hear a faint voice repeating something over and over, but couldn't understand it, nor could he discern where it was coming from. Steve concentrated and allowed himself to tune into the voice. "The sword! The sword! Alexander's sword!" Kumicho said, "Whoever is against me does not live long enough to do anything about it." He launched Daruma's sword directly at Steve at lightning speed, piercing straight into Steve's heart. Steve's irises glowed a bright orange. The lobby changed colour. It resembled a photographic negative of the room, except now he could see what he had only sensed previously. The white room had looked empty, but in reality the room was black and full of hideous demons of all shapes and sizes. All the demons looked like they were stuck to Kumicho. Elastic black gel strings connected to him and stretched out in assembled formations on the walls. They were jeering and laughing and mocking Steve until he looked each and every one of them in the eye. He saw Temyana. She said, "The sword. It was Alexander's. His alchemy. I understand now." Then an eruption of orange energy from Steve's chest exploded into the room. Everything faded to black. I mean, come on. Seriously, were you thinking it was going to be a good ending at this point? A nice little meal with Daddy? No chance. This is horrific. Horrific. See the sword back there? Another death. 2 deaths. Terrible. Steve's love of his life, Megumi. Bonded. Eternal. Never a doubt about that. The truest of love. I'm heartbroken. Every time I read that, it kills me. I wrote it and it kills me. Ah, poor Steve. Poor Megumi. Poor Sensei. All this time he thought it was him. He did it. He made Hiro like that. One of his own students turned him to the darkness. Made him a demon. Oh, it's terrible. I keep saying it. Anyway. Sensei. It wasn't a glorious ending. Kumicho. An apex demon. One of the few. There isn't many. That's why it's called the few. Apex demon. We're talking extremely powerful agent of chaos. Literally just zoomed across the room, sliced off his head. He was nothing. Nothing. What else? Steve managed to expel the demon from Hiro, only to be fearing for everyone else in the room on his side. Megumi ends up getting into Nakano. She wasn't nice to begin with. She only got worse. Oh, terrible. What did we learn? What did we see? We had a question about the significance of being good. What does it mean to be a good man? A good person. Think about it. There was an interesting discussion, an interesting thought process for me. Being around influential people and being exposed to some very powerful people in my life, you quickly determine that being good and being powerful are often extraordinarily difficult to be one and the same person. Using that power will corrupt you in a way, without a doubt. And as a consequence, it becomes difficult to be good because you start putting your interests ahead of everything else, which is, the gathering of power tends to lead itself to that process, doesn't it? You lose this willingness to do something for nothing. Altruism is dead at that point, it's safe to say. So Konnichiwa was having that debate, and he was testing young Steve. There was no doubt he was testing him. He was saying, what does it mean to be good? My gardener's good. I don't even remember his name. Just some bloke that, I don't know, just trims the hedges. I don't even know. If he's gone, there'll be another one in his place. But are you a leader? Powerful? Are you a giant? Okay, so there was that thought process, and Steve was feeling increasingly uncomfortable about what he would be able to provide for his family. There's this guy, he just went into a 5-story castle. Dear Lord. Moats, no less. So he's looking at all that. This guy's clearly able to provide, but then again, not a particularly nice person, and certainly didn't do a good job with his daughter by any shape or means. So, that being said, he still walked in and felt uncomfortable. His suit was a bit rough, and he sort of adjusted his collar and didn't look quite as charming as our dear Konnichiwa. Agari Shin Agari. Agari Shin, sorry. And then the battle. Something got him going. Konnichiwa was pretty fired up, and he just refused to let go. I think it was clear he was going to kill Nakandari Sensei. Well, he did that, didn't he? He did that very quickly. And then something peculiar happened when the sword came out, and Steve... let's go with the sequence of events here. We had the shisa that came to life from Steve's necklace, remembering the story from the taxi driver a few chapters earlier. From the smallest shisa, they managed to fight an evil dragon that was torturing and tormenting the people of Okinawa. So legends were created, and Steve managed to raise the shisa from a blessed necklace, his little medallion around his neck. So he did that, and they were very helpful. There's no doubt about that. It did save things for a little bit, didn't it? Let's not kid ourselves. Well, the demon might have got to Megumi already, Hiro's demon spirit. So the shisa certainly stopped that. Alas, Konnichiwa, being the apex demon that he is, dealt them a savage blow, sorted them out very promptly. And then we got to Steve when he interacted and finally confronted Konnichiwa, and he's fighting against this man, and it's clear that he's being outclassed. Konnichiwa is far too powerful for Steve and Ishiganto. Far too powerful. But that sword, Steve touched it. It gave him power. Something about that sword. He had so much power, he was able to smack up Konnichiwa a bit, kick him around, and really smash into him powerfully. Konnichiwa was shocked. He didn't understand it. That orange glow on the blade when he sliced through the lion energy. Clearly, something strange was going on. Konnichiwa didn't want to kill his daughter. Steve didn't want his wife to die. Konnichiwa was just too quick, wasn't he? That sword instantly destroyed the lion energy and then kept going straight into our beloved Megumi's throat. I had friends who read the book, and they literally just said, yeah, this is unacceptable. How dare you do that to Megumi? And then people I didn't even know. Don't you dare let anything happen to her. I'm not feeling good about where this is all going. I was getting messages like that. Emails. It happened. I'm sorry. It had to happen, didn't it? Steve's on a path, and this path includes great amounts of suffering. That is forging an identity. There is no doubt about it. The explosion at the end, the sword went through his heart. Everything faded to black. Is he dead? He's not dead. We've got a number of chapters to go. He can't be dead, can he? Is he dead? You're going to have to come back and listen to the next chapter about that. Is he dead? Did something die? Who knows? Stay tuned, we'll find out. We did have a clue. Alexander's sword. He saw Temyana. There was no incense. There was no reason for her to be anywhere near there. I mean, there was a reason, but would he see her as a human? As a human? Who knows? Who knows? As Ishiganto, maybe he had a chance. Maybe. Temyana said, Alexander's sword. A conclusion was made. She figured something out. She couldn't understand. She understood the connection to Daruma. She remembered that the relationship with the ancestor of Kumicho and Megumi, there was a connection there. But that sword, we're going to find out a few things shortly, I think. I promise. We need answers. I refuse to let my readers and audience be in suspense that long. So I'm sorry we had to lose our beautiful Megumi. I'm sorry we had to lose that wonderful, beautiful man, Nakandari Sensei, who clearly was trying to make amends for all the things he'd done wrong. And some of those things, Taki, reporting back to Kumicho about Taki's movements. Oh my God. That even sort of upset Steve and Megumi. They didn't really know about that. Although Nakandari did say he made amends with Hiro himself, with Uncle Taki himself. So some comforting news there. He did make peace with Uncle Taki. A horrific chapter. I'm sure you would agree. I hope I read it okay. I was getting excited. I was getting emotional. Terrifying. 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 Pivotal for the storyline of our great hero. And then a final thing, just to hurt us a little bit more. Just to know that Kumicho looked at Steve and said, right, now I know who you are. You could be one of us. Bow to me and you can be one of the few. You could be one of us. Do we think Steve's going to be a bad guy? Seriously, could he be a bad guy? We don't know yet. He's still got a long way to go. Many chapters. My dear, dear friends, soldiers of the infinite, supporters of REN-SHEN Half Spirit, that concludes the second part of REN-SHEN Half Spirit. There are 3 parts. This concludes Japan. Wonder where he ends up next. And in what way does he end up there? Thank you for your support. I hope I haven't horrified you. I appreciate your commitment to listening to all these things. Thank you. Buy the book, please. It makes me smile when I see the book sales in very strange countries. So I quite get a thrill out of that. Having said that, let's leave it at that. Thank you again. I will see you for the next chapter. We're going to call it an interlude. Lots of information to be learned shortly. Stay tuned, my dear friends. Thank you. I've made some music in honor of this rather tragic event. So please stay tuned and listen to my wonderful tune I've made in honor of the eternal love Steve has for his beloved Megumi.